Mildred. Lee was my maiden name, the name I was born with. And then I went to Mrs. Avery. Then from Avery, I went to Wilkerson. And from Wilkerson, I went to Lewis. And that's who I am now. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the most beautiful place in the whole world. I was in 3rd grade by the time I learned how to spell my parents' name. My father's name was Lafayette Lee. My mother's name, and you know how many letters that takes.
Yeah.
Okay, and my mother's name was Cornelius.
Oh.
My mother said it was just like you spell the male name, Cornelius.
Oh, okay.
Lee, of course, she was married to my dad. My mother came from Mississippi, and whenever she met my dad, she was in Mississippi, but they claim she came from Arkansas, but she didn't. She didn't come from Arkansas. She came from Mississippi, and then my father, he came from Arkansas.
Okay.
And he got on the railroad. He rode the railroad, and that was how he went over to Mississippi and met my mother.
And what year did they meet, if you know?
Well, I have no clue. All I know is that it was, let me see. It wasn't horse and buggy time, but
Not quite that long.
not quite that far, but it was old car time. I mean, real old cars at that time whenever they met. They had together, my mom, I had 5 brothers. I had 6, one died, and I had no sisters, only me. Okay, my oldest brother was called McKinley Lee. And after him, there was a son called William. William died as a baby whenever he was about 7 months old. He had pneumonia and he died. And then after him, then I was born. Okay, and then after me came, that was Augustus. Okay, that was his name, or is his name. He's still alive. Then after Augustus came Edward. And after Edward came Lafayette. I asked my mother to please name that baby after my dad, and she said, okay. So his name was Lafayette. And after Lafayette, it was Frank Stanley.
All right. And that's the baby of
That was the baby, yes. It was great. I was in charge. Because my oldest brother was 10 years older than me, so he was like, pretty much out of the gang.
Right.
But we did everything together, rode bikes, climbed trees. I did all the boy stuff first.
Yeah.
Then I learned the girl stuff from my mom later. But I enjoyed doing the boy stuff. And I hung with them wherever they went. They went to pick blackberries. I went to pick blackberries. They went to play baseball. Then I played baseball. I was the pitcher. And got hit right between the eyes and knocked coal out.
Lord.
But it didn't stop me from wanting to play. And so then later, as we grew, they learned to listen to me.
Yeah.
I was the big sis in charge. whenever I evolved into a girl.
Yeah.
First, they treated me like one of the guys.
Right.
But then when I started being a girl, then they really enjoyed that, me being a girl.
Yeah.
Because we had one situation where we were still in elementary, and they told me, my mom worked a full-time job. And they wanted to know from me, can't you cook? You a girl, can't you cook? And so I told them, no, I don't know how to cook because Mama never let me in the kitchen.
Right.
And so they said, well, you ought to be able to cook something. And we used to pick blackberries and keep them there for her to make pies.
Okay.
So they said, why don't you try to make a pie? So I said, okay, I'll try it. So I said, all right. So I didn't know how to make it. I just knew that you put flour. I knew you put sugar. I knew you put butter. I knew some of the basics.
Right.
And so I put all that together. And then I put water and I stirred it all up. And I put it in a pie shell and I put the blackberries in there.
Right.
And then we put it in the oven. I had no clue what to put it on. So we just put it in the oven and we baked it and we baked it and we baked it. Okay, then they said it's smelling, it gotta be done. So we took it out. This was a project.
Yeah.
And we took it out and they tried to cut it. First they used a regular knife. They couldn't cut it. So then they used a hammer. And the hammer, the knife didn't work and neither did the hammer.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, then I said, you just don't know what you're doing. So I took the whole pie and I threw it up against the wall. I figured that would crack it open.
Yeah.
Didn't. It fell on the ground, on the floor,
Yeah.
and it was just the way it came out.
Yeah.
It was apparently I had made it so well that it never came apart. It ended up being a ceramic instead of a regular pie.
Regular pie.
And so it got told on. So as soon as Mom came through the door, they was like, she can't cook. Mildred can't cook. And so she said, I never let her in the kitchen. Why should you be able to cook? They said, because she a girl. She said, well, that, in some cases, that don't matter.
Yeah. How was your relationship with your mom?
Very loving. She was truly an amazing mother. Her life, we were her life.
Right.
And she taught us from itty bitty that everything is perfect and in place. And when you do a job, the one thing that I learned at first, I didn't like her very much. Because anything you did, if you didn't do it right, you had to do it over and over and over until you got it right. And I thought that was kind of mean. And so, but I learned to get stuff right early.
Right.
If you don't want to do it over and over and over, you got to get it right early. She was just took care of us. She would have our breakfast ready. She was up at 4 a.m. making fresh baked biscuits, and you could smell the coffee and the bacon, and bacon and eggs and a full breakfast. And so I used to beg off. I'd say, Mama, please, can I just have some juice? Because I didn't want to be trying to eat all this food.
Right.
But my brothers, they enjoyed it thoroughly. They tore it up. Before they went to school, they threw down, and then because it was cold climate.
Right.
So she felt you needed some hot food in your stomach before you go out of the house. She was a domestic. Mom was a domestic. She cleaned houses for the people, for different people that was rich.
Okay.
And she would go to different homes every day and clean their homes. And our house was a great reflection because you could eat off our floor. She not only cleaned their house, but she made sure our house was clean too.
What was your relationship with your dad?
Well, when I was 10 years old, he decided he was going to go back and be a farmer. So they sat down and discussed it. Not like today where everybody's fighting.
Right.
They sat down and discussed it. Now, see, I wasn't supposed to be a part of it because they never talked over important stuff in front of kids back then.
Right.
So I sat on the steps quiet, and you couldn't see from the front room and the kitchen where they were, you couldn't see over the banisters and there was a wall there, and you couldn't see into the steps. So they didn't know that I was sitting right there with my pajamas on, quietly listening to them. And they talked it over, and she said, if you decide, she said, I won't return to the South. She told him, I will not return. I won't bring my kids up in the South. And I heard her say to him, you wasn't a good farmer when you was farming. And I said, uh-oh. And so He didn't object. He didn't argue with her. He just said, I'm going to return because my grandma kept writing him letters and asking him to come. She had moved down there. She was in Pittsburgh, but she moved to Arkansas. And she kept bugging him and bugging him, writing him letter after letter. I don't know what that's about as an adult, but encouraging him to come back down there. So he decided he was going. So Mom said, you may go, and I will not bother you, but I won't Mama called the authorities. I won't call the authorities on you, but you cannot take any of the children with you because their life will not be as good as it will be if we remain here. My parents raised me with the values where they were very, very strict. We were in church every Sunday and some days during the week, okay? And that's right, we had to be there. And it was no question. There's no question if they say, okay, we're going to church, they went with us. They didn't send us, they went with us. And they saw that we were in church, and so we learned all the values from church. And then their values were they were extremely strict, and whatever they told us to do, like in the morning when you get up, you can't just walk into the house, walk downstairs and just go and then say, okay, eat and whatever and go. You had to come anytime you entered a room where there were other people, one of the requirements was for you to say good morning. You had to acknowledge, that's what they said, acknowledge the presence of others. And Mama used to say a dog is due a hello. And so that kind of got the message home. And they taught manners. They taught manners, all about how you sit down at the table, how you concentrate at the table, how you can have a conversation, but you have to be recognized, and how you eat your food, how you sit, all of it. And so we were trained, I should say, to the max. We were trained, mostly by my mom. It made us really successful because we knew how to talk with other people. We had a large family, and we had everything that we needed. Like we had one of the uncles fix cars, another one was a chef, another aunt was a seamstress. So we really didn't have to do a lot of talking outside the home until you were adult. And then once you were a teenager and an adult, then you had to communicate with people outside. In elementary school, I went to our elementary. We had to walk it was at least, I'll just cut it short and say it might have been a little more, but I'll say about 10 miles we had to walk to school every morning, elementary, every morning. Then we had to walk home for lunch. Then we had to go back to school after lunch and then come back home after school. But elementary was full of multicultural. Most of the children that I went to school I called it old country. Italian, Slovakian, that was the nationalities represented in the elementary school.
Do you remember the name of your elementary school by chance?
I do, Bergwin Elementary. Middle school was a different school now. We left elementary and we had to go even further for middle school.
And do you remember the name of the middle school?
Gladstone was the.
And this is still in
about,
Pittsburgh, right?
That's Pittsburgh.
So
the weather was cold, and sometimes it was freezing cold, but there comes my mother again. She always made sure we had warm clothing and good shoes, warm jackets and warm coats, had our head covered. She said if your hands and your head are covered and your feet, then you're good. The rest of you is pretty good. And so she made sure that we always had, because she was on health. She wanted us to be healthy. That's why we had to take castor oil 3 times a year.
Make sure y'all was good.
Yeah, make sure that you stayed healthy. And olive oil every day. Yes, right after breakfast, you had to take a tablespoon of olive oil before you go to school. And you didn't have no choice either. It was mandatory. Take your card, eat your breakfast, or even if I got away with just juice, I had to drink the juice and then take the card de pollo, and then I was allowed to go out to the school. High school for me was a nightmare. I had to catch the bus to high school, but I was zoned to a predominantly Jewish high school. It was Taylor Alderdice High, okay? And it was rated the highest high school in the whole Pittsburgh area. Our community was right next to the Jewish community, okay? And so we were zoned to that school. But the majority of my friends went to Belfield, which was a school that prided themselves on tasks that were not so academic. It was a trade school. Trade school, that's what Belfield was. And that, because all my friends was going to that school, that's the school I wanted to go to. But my mother said, no, you will go to Taylor Alderdice. That's the school you are zoned to, and that's the school you will go to. So the young Jewish kids, they was driving cars. They had the most elaborate wardrobe you ever want to see. And I had none of that. I had a base nice clothing, but nothing expensive. Regular nice clothing. And of course, I didn't know how to drive. I had no clue in no driving. I didn't even think about driving, okay? And so she said, that doesn't matter. You will go there and you will get an education, and it will be easy for you to get into college because you will be prepared and you will have the highest rating of the whole Pittsburgh area. So I cried for an entire summer, begging and pleading. And in September, that's when we started school, then I ended up, guess where? In Taylor Alderdice High School. I could have saved all them tears because it didn't sway her at all. In Alderdice, there was over 3,000 students. It was a big school. And there might have been 20, out of all that 20, or I'll say maybe 25. Children of other cultures besides the Jewish culture. And apparently the students were not knowledgeable enough to want to include us. See how nice I said that? I didn't call them prejudice and all that. I just felt that their knowledge was limited. And so they treated all of us, now I can only speak for myself, terrible. I was going to class one day and a boy pushed me down the steps. I had a whole armful of books. The books went everywhere. And the steps were marble, and I grabbed the banister as I was falling, or I may have been hurt severe. One of the girls turned to him and said, "Why did you do that?" Because we were going up and down the steps. And he said she was in my way. And so some of the students helped me pick up the books, and the others stepped on them and kept on going where they were going. And so I also tried out for the majorettes. I wanted to be a majorette. So I looked in the school newspaper, and I went to the gymnasium where you go to try out. Well, the coach told me when I came through the door, there was a bunch of girls there, and he probably had tried out already or was in the process. And so when I came through the door, of course, they all stared at me. And then I went over to the coach and I said, I would like to try out. She said, we already had tryouts. And I said, but in the paper, she said, I said we already had tryouts. So, of course, crushed, I turned and started walking towards the door. And I heard one of the girls say, "Who wants to put on a uniform after her?" So I continued on out the door, and then I just went on. There was no need to tell anybody. It was no need to do anything about it. I felt like, well, if they don't want me, then I'm just going to not be involved. Yeah.
Did your mom ever say anything about how the students treated you, or you know, like a kid pushing you down the steps? Did your mom ever speak on that? Did you ever tell her?
No. I didn't want her to get upset about forcing me to go to that school. And so, and I knew there was nothing she could do. And so I didn't want her to be concerned about that. So I just sucked it up and just got myself together, and I never said anything to her about that happening to me until later in life. I had one experience that really made my experience there much better. I went to the book room for one of the teachers to get their supplies. And I met the lady that was over the book room. Was a beautiful black lady. And she said to me, "What do you do in your spare time?" And I said, "My spare time or my study time?" She said, "No, not necessarily your study time, but what do you do on campus?" And so I said, I just go to school and just do my work, and that's it. She said, "How would you like to work in the book room?" I said, "I would love it." And she said, "Well, you report down here and I will teach you how to work in the book room." And so that saved the day for me.
And what year was this?
That was in, I guess I was about 10th grade. Not only did she teach me how to work in the book room, but she taught me how to deal with students that were discourteous and ignorant and didn't know how to approach me when I went to service them at the counter and get their teacher supplies. She said, "That is ignorant, and you step back from the counter and let them know that you will not wait on them until they know how to present whatever it is that they came for." I had a counselor to tell me, now she wasn't very nice, at the high school, that you should have gone to the trade school because we have no scholarship money, we have no money, and we don't, and you will not be able to go to college. So, but my mom said something different. So that meant I follow what Mama said. She said, "Do your best, and then you will be able to do whatever it is you want to do in life if you just do your best."
What, do you know your mom's highest level of education?
8th grade. 8th grade. That's what she told. She didn't keep no secrets from us about her education, and that's why she said you will graduate at least from high school.
And so when it comes to positive reinforcement, you think you take after your mom with supporting your family to strive for the best?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I tell not only my family, but all the kids that I was a counselor over or counselor contact, they benefited from my being brought up in that way. Because I told them all, there's nothing you can't do. All you got to do is put your mind to it, and you will be able to do it.
Did you go to college immediately afterwards?
No, went to work because I didn't have a scholarship. And back in them days, only the rich went, and the rest of the folks, you didn't go. You went to a trade or you went to work. But only I felt like it's trying to get back to that.
Yeah.
But only the rich that could pay for college went to college. But now there are far more scholarships available. And so, but then there wasn't many scholarships, and only the very affluent and very rich one was going to college.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good first day. We went from childhood up to high school and a little bit past high school.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.